Hello, and welcome to Perspectives on Faith on Ebru TV. I'm your host, Dr. Amir Hussain. With me today is my guest, Dr. Bruce Lawrence. Professor Lawrence is the Nancy and Jeffrey Marcus Professor of Humanities at Duke University, Professor of Islamic Studies at Duke University, and the Director of the Duke Islamic Studies Center. Welcome, Professor Lawrence.
Thank you, Amir. Good to be here with you.
Wonderful to be here with you. Could you tell us a little bit about your background? You are one of the most senior, one of the most distinguished scholars of Islam in North America, and you've been doing this for a lot longer than most people have been interested in Islam in North America. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in studying Islam?
Well, actually, it's about half a century now. When I was 16, I took my first Arabic course, and it was actually a mistake. I wanted to do Chinese, and there was a schedule conflict, so a friend of mine said, let's try this other language, and I said, what is it? And he said, Arabic. I said, Arabic? Sounds strange, but let's go. So it's been 50 years on doing Arabic, and first it was philosophy. Had a wonderful undergraduate teacher who got me inspired to think about philosophy and to recognize that there were major names in Islamic philosophy. I think I studied Ibn Sina before I studied Aristotle, but it was fun doing both. And from there it was literature, and from there history, and then I got out of school, actually did Turkish, believe it or not, for 2 years, did Turkish, and thought, well, maybe I'll become an Ottoman historian. And then I realized that's really tough. That's even tougher than just doing Arabic and thinking about philosophy. So I took time out, went to the Navy, then went and did my MDiv up in Cambridge at Harvard, and then I decided, I really wanted to do Arabic and got into the program at Yale, worked with Professor Rosenthal, Franz Rosenthal, best known for translating the Muqaddimah from Arabic to English. And then I got lucky again and got a job at Duke, my first job, and I've been there for 37 years.
Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful place to be, and you've created this wonderful Islamic Studies Center there. Can you tell us a little bit about the program there and the things that you do?
Sure. When I was hired at Duke, not to teach Islam, but to teach what's called Asian religions, as you know, from Harvard. And so the idea is if you know one, you know all. If you know about Islam, you know Buddhism, Hinduism, toss in Sikhism, Jainism. You're an all-purpose infield player when it comes to Asia, and you can do any religion. But gradually, as my research developed, Amir, I became more and more interested in thinking about Islam and thinking about Islam and contemporary movements. My website now has as its sort of entry logo, defrocked medievalist, Abrahamic pluralist. Mm-hmm. And actually, until the Iranian Revolution of '79, I thought the world had ended or should have ended in 1500. All the great stuff I studied, all the wonderful scholars from the Islamic past, except for maybe Suyuti, had lived before 1500. But then the Iranian Revolution happened, and because I'd also learned Persian, there was an emphasis on thinking about contemporary Islam. And so if there's one good thing that came out of Khomeini, it pushed me into the modern world, or at least the modern period, and thinking about Islam. So that shifted towards Muslim social movements. And I still kept this seed in the back of my mind that I really liked the pre-modern period and liked the classical sources, and above all the Quran. And so luckily for me, it's back about 5 years ago, it was 2002, I was contacted by a British publisher who said, would you write a book on the Quran? I said, no. He said, why not? I said, listen, I'm not an expert on the Quran. I said, I use it, I love it, I learn from it, but I'm not an expert.
That's not your training.
I'm not my training. I'm not a scriptural exegete. Tafsir has not been my field of study. It's been tariq, history, or tasawwuf. As you know, I've done a lot of work on institutional Sufism. But he kept pushing me, and I said, well, why? Why do you want me, of all people, to write a book on the Quran? He said, well, because Michael Sells has done a great job for people who want the literary stuff, but we want people who never have heard of the Quran, perhaps have a completely erroneous notion of Islam, and you have to be able to write a book without footnotes. Oh, I said, that's very hard. For a scholar to write without footnotes is like trying to write without ink. I mean, how do you do it? Mm-hmm. But anyway, I accepted that challenge. Oh, and also without adverbs. Adverbs? I thought they were very important. But anyway, I wrote a sample chapter. First time I'd ever done this, 5 years ago. I'm now 66. So I already turned 60. And for the first time in my life, I wrote a book that was quote-unquote not for academics, for a popular audience, in quote-unquote simple English, and I found it extraordinarily liberating. And so I got the contract, I did 1 chapter, I did 15 chapters, I revised it multiple times, and it came out in this series called The Quran, a Biography, which was not my title. I wanted to call this book, I wanted to call it The Book of Signs Over Time. But the whole series is called Books That Change the World, and every one is a biography. So for instance, Karen Armstrong is doing the Bible. Hers is called The Bible, a Biography. Those are the only 2 scriptures. They didn't do the Mahabharata, they didn't do any Buddhist Pitakas or sutras. They did instead just these 2, the Quran and the Bible. And then, Marx Das Kapital, Darwin's Evolution of Species. All these are major books. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations.
Or the important books that changed
Only important
history.
books that changed the world, and the Quran was defined as one. But that meant in writing this book, instead of doing tafsir, which I'm not qualified to do and would have resisted and probably declined to do, I had the opportunity to think about how the Quran itself has been interpreted over the ages from different places. And I must say, 2 parts of that book really educated me in a way I never had thought about the Quran before. One is I went back and tried to recall where I had first felt the awe, not just about the language and use of the Quran, but about its public display.
Okay.
And I realized that the first place was back in 1966 when I went to Jerusalem for the first time and went to the Dome of the Rock, and I looked up and I said, oh, that's familiar. Well, that's the Quran. And I suddenly found myself reading the Quran in this space, and it's magical. I mean, it's extraordinary. The book itself is extraordinary, but to see it in those columns and those border definitions in the Qubbat al-Sakha, in the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem and Haram al-Sharif, really impressed me. So 1 chapter in my book about the Quran biography is the Dome of the Rock and why those Quranic inscriptions and what do they mean. And as you know, the other part of my life has been spent in the subcontinent in South Asia. And again, when I thought about the Quran, not as a book, but as an artifact almost, as a part of history that has shaped different places and defined them, I said the other place that's been defined by the Quran, not as a book, but as iconic calligraphy, is the Taj Mahal. And when I told the publisher I was going to do a chapter on the Taj Mahal, I said, but I thought that was Hindu. I said, no. It's not only Muslim, but it has actually verses from the Quran that are picked for a specific reason. And I think it's important to sort of show that what everyone thinks is one of the wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal, is also a wonder for exemplifying the message of the Quran.
A deeply Islamic building, and that's one of the things I think is so misunderstood by people, that we tend not to look at the artistic heritage of Muslims. And just the 2 buildings you named, the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem is sort of the iconic image of Jerusalem. Everyone on their list of the 10 most important or most beautiful buildings in the world puts the Taj Mahal, which is a Muslim building, a mausoleum. And I think that's so important to say that Muslims have contributed in tremendous ways, and we can talk about this as well, to the arts, and I know your work in that area. But tell me a little bit more about writing a book for a popular audience, because I think that's so interesting that here you are as one of the foremost scholars of Islam in North America and a very distinguished scholarly career, and now you're being asked to write a book for a popular audience. Do you think that talks about the need to help non-Muslims or even Muslims who aren't trained in the scholarly traditions to learn more about Islam? How to make the Quran explainable or explicable to either non-Muslims or Muslims who don't have that scholarly training in understanding the Quran?